April inflation looking a lot better than March inflation. What's led to this improvement?
Oh, well, looks a lot better than March, looks slightly worse than February. So we should put this in perspective. What we've seen is month-to-month fluctuation in the index in the inflation rate. The trend remains downward, but we shouldn't exaggerate the downward trend. It's just a swing around the trend.
I mean, obviously, election spending by the federal government was a major driver of inflation in the first quarter of this year. But what about issues of imported inflation that many African countries are suffering with at the moment? Rising fuel and food costs. I know that food accounts for a significant component of Nigeria's consumer inflation index. How does that play a part?
Oh, well, looking at the recent peak in the index, which was the one announced about August last year, 13.7%. To date, you could say that because of the downward trend in measured inflation, we do not see any significant pass-through from increases in commodity prices, be it fuel or food, into Nigerian inflation. And it's not a surprise. Nigeria is not a net importer of fuel, and Nigeria is not a net importer of food. Nigeria is a net exporter of fuel and would most definitely also be a net exporter of food. So higher food prices shouldn't be that much of a big threat to inflation in Nigeria, because much of Nigerian food is subsistence. Nigeria produces the food that it eats. There are a few items that Nigeria has net imports in, like rice or sugar, but that cannot dominate the entire food basket. I thought that the fears that were expressed about the likely inflationary impact of the election spending was probably one-sided, and it was also most likely exaggerated. We've seen that the month of election, that inflation actually month-on-month fell. Right. Which meant that we ignored the likely, dampening effect on economic activity that the election and the restrictions on movement constituted.
Okay, Dr. Teriba, we do know that the central bank would like inflation to be somewhere in the region of about 10%, so they're gunning for a lower figure. Is it likely to happen this year?
Well, if we consider two factors, one is that to date, the central bank continued to tell us that money supply growth has been weak and credit growth has been weak, cash holding has been weak, and the trend of inflation, as the second factor, has been steadily downward. I will expect to see inflation in the single digits over the next quarter or so.
The Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank will be meeting next Tuesday. What sort of issues are they going to be contemplating now that inflation looks a little bit more subdued? We do know that they'd introduced monetary tightening by raising interest rates to 7.5%. Do you expect any further tightening, or will rates be steady, because they also need to stimulate credit flow?
Good. Well, from September, when the central bank moved over to the tightening mode, to now, I think that we have not said enough about the need to ensure that the growth that Nigeria reports does not continue to be jobless. We need to say more about employment, we need to say more about spending, and the likely impact, the net impact of the election might not have been inflationary. It might be mildly recessionary. I think the central bank needs to, pay more attention to growth issues at their next meeting. I don't think that any tightening was called for to start with. I don't think that any further tightening is necessary. I think we need to say more about the real economy, how to strengthen credit, spending, and employment.
The impact of the latest inflation figures on the naira. I mean, prior to the elections, we'd seen a lot of dollar demand with a few pre-election jitters creeping through. We're told that in April, the central bank spent over $2 billion just simply defending the naira. Can they continue to do this? What are your expectations for the naira going forward? And if the central bank must continue to be in the market, what is the impact on Nigeria's reserve position?
Well, the issue about the naira has more to do with the international economic environment than with domestic Nigerian economic environment. At the moment, Nigeria continues to gain steadily from favorable commodity prices. So you'll see reserves are most likely to accrue. But the fairly unstable nature of the global financial environment means that there might be some pressure now and then on the capital account, on foreign exchange demand. I think that Nigeria has responded correctly by using what it gains from the current account to defend the pressure on the capital account, and I think Nigeria should continue to do that. Increased demand on the foreign exchange itself, the fact that the central bank supplies it means that naira is being mopped up and is dampening the domestic liquidity effects. So I don't see any inflationary pressure, and I do think that the current level of the naira is sustainable.